Hey guys, another video for our Myths About Japan playlist. So every week we get sent lots of stuff that people see on the internet, and I saw this thing, is it true? And I saw this thing, what do you think about this? And all people stating things as fact that they saw on the internet. I saw this thing, in Japan they do this, in Japan they do that. So we get them all the time. Most of the time we don't even respond to them because it's like, yeah, there's some more BS about Japan, or we just tell people, no, that's BS, it's not true. So this week we had a couple. We had this one, which is obviously a tree being moved, right? So in Japan, you know, if there is a tree in the way when they're doing road construction, they move it. Right, so someone sent us that because they'd been following the old Japanese farmhouse story and the trees being demolished there, and said, you know, what about this? You know, do they really look after trees like that? And no. So like all the myths that we see about Japan, usually they're based on an element of truth, and then the rest of it's just BS, right? So in this case, the element of truth is that is really a tree. And it is really being moved, right? And that's the only part that's true, right? The rest of it's all myth. So, in actual fact, that tree was in a park in Tokyo, and the tree was a bit special, and the park was a bit special. So, that's why it's being preserved, and that's why it was moved. So often we see these myths are usually spread partly by people who just don't know that it's not true, that, you know, they hear something and then they spread it thinking that they believe it and they spread it, and often it's by people who know it's not true, but they're just trying to get clicks on whatever it is that they're posting on the internet, and sometimes it's just people that aren't really sure, but they don't really care if it's true or not, and we see a lot of that people just repeating stuff, or just showing stuff just to get clicks. So in this case, it was one of those. It was one of those pages on YouTube, you know, that they on Facebook that specialise in collecting other people's photos and other people's videos that they know will get clicks, and just sharing them so that they get lots of clicks. Basically, that's all they're interested in. So they don't really care if what they show is true or if it's not true. They don't really care, as long as it gets clicks and gets attention. That's all they really want. So that's the case with this one. You know, it makes it sound like it's mainstream. Now, in this drive that we're doing at the moment, you won't see a tree like that one that's in the thumbnail, the tree that was being moved. Usually, if you see a tree like that in Japan, usually it's in the grounds of a shrine or the grounds of a temple, or in a big old forest somewhere, or in a big old park somewhere. That's pretty much the only places you're going to see trees like that. You're not going to see a tree like that beside the road where we're driving at the moment. The trees in the forests that you can see from here are a combination of bamboo and new growth forests. So over the years, you know, the trees have been cut down and used to build houses and other things, and then more trees have been planted and have grown up, and then they've been cut down and then more trees have grown. And so usually that's what you're looking at. So big, healthy, old trees like that, usually just places where they might have been protected, shrines, temples, parks, that sort of thing. Even the big forests in Japan, most of the big forests in Japan are pretty well new growth. And over the years they've been cut down and replanted and cut down and replanted and used. With some exceptions. We've showed you exceptions. You know, there are some special places in Japan where the trees have been preserved for different reasons. But usually it's a reason for it. Sometimes it's just because it's straight up too inaccessible, that over the years people haven't been able to access it, to cut down the trees because it's too inaccessible. Interesting, there's a huge percentage of Japan, something like 80% or something, is unusable, as far as it's too hilly, too mountainous to build on or to cultivate for crops. So a huge percentage, like 80% or something. But they can access a lot of that for cutting down trees and replanting and that sort of stuff. So that whole story about in order to build a road, you'll actually see if we get that far in this talk, you might see a road being built further down where we're going, and the trees in that area are only going to be like the ones that we can see from here. They're probably no older than 30, 40, 50 years old. They're nothing special, lots of bamboo. So if they want to put a road through pretty much anywhere, they're really not going to encounter big old trees like that anyway. So usually they just cut straight through, bulldoze right through it, like they did next to the old farmhouse. You know, that's a good example of that. You know, those trees, for us, they were very special, but really they're like 40 or 50-year-old trees, and for them it was just in the way, so they just cut them down. So as far as roads are concerned, they'll just cut a straight line between wherever they're going, bulldoze any trees that are in the way. Sometimes they'll replant new trees next to the road when they're finished. Sometimes they will. Depends on where it is, of course. So yeah, basically total nonsense. So while we're on this, there was another one this week. Our dear friend in Europe sent us one that was pretty clever, actually. It was a drawing. You know how artists can make a 3D drawing, a 2D drawing look really 3D? And this artist had drawn a child crossing the street, and he'd drawn it on the road, which made it look, he did a really good job. It looked like there was a kid walking across the street, which is really clever, because obviously people driving would go, oh, and drive really carefully, and it was just a drawing on the road. So it was pretty clever. But the title was, you know, in Japan, you know, an artist has been drawing children on the road to make the traffic slow down, you know. And I looked at it and it just didn't look right. Couldn't work out why. Couldn't really read the number plates of the cars, and it just didn't look like Japan. It just didn't. And then I noticed the cars were driving on the right-hand side of the road. Right. Okay. So it was still an excellent photo, and I'm still glad my buddy sent it to me, but, you know, it clearly wasn't Japan. And we get this all the time. It's sort of like, if you want to spread some BS on the internet, if you want to make up some myth or some story that's not true or is nonsense or something, if you say it's from Japan, it seems that people are more likely to believe it. You know, because we see that a lot. We see these bullshit stories. In Japan, there's this, you know, and it's sort of like, because maybe to a lot of people Japan's a bit mysterious, and the fact is there is a lot of weird stuff in Japan. So maybe if you say something's from Japan or something's in Japan, maybe people are more likely to believe it and not question it than if you said it was from somewhere else, maybe. So, don't know why, but we do see a lot of this stuff, you know, is this true, is that true, is this true, is that true? And usually too, there's an element of truth to it, but, you know, I mean, we got one from a family member this week. We were talking to one of our family members in Australia, and they said they'd heard that myth that in Japan, kids only go to school, the first 4 years of school is only to learn manners, and that they don't do tests and they don't really, you know, study much the first 4 years. It's only to learn manners, which is total BS. We actually made a video about that once before, if you haven't seen that video already. You know, you tell that to a Japanese kids in grade 3 or 4, they'd laugh their heads off at that. The amount of homework they do and the study and all the learning of the hiragana and katakana and kanji and math and everything else. It's total BS, you know. It's total BS. So it's just something about the internet and Japan and people who want to get clicks on their videos and on their pictures and on their Facebook posts, and that combination seems to come together for this perfect storm. Maybe it'll change in the future. Maybe some other country will become the country that all the weird shit's supposed to come from and all the BS gets written about, you know. But in the meantime, it's Japan. If you haven't seen our Myths About Japan playlist yet, check it out. That we've addressed a few. We can't address them all. There's too many. We'd have to make a video every day addressing the myths about Japan, you know, because there's so many. So usually we only get the ones that particularly stand out to us, or maybe one of our patrons asks us about one, or you know, something that's particularly wants addressing, we want to address. But most of us go, nah, that's BS, nah, it's BS, nah, it's BS. No, that's BS. Most people don't care. It's just entertainment, isn't it? So, anyway, that's today's two pieces of BS from Japan. They're both quite positive, actually. Quite often, some of the stuff that gets spread about Japan, the fake stuff, is actually negative, and that's a bit sort of, oh, really? You know, they're saying these negative things that aren't true. But these two things were quite positive, really. You know, the image of the tree being moved is a very positive image, and the art being drawn on the road was a positive thing as well. You know, that was a good thing to see. But you know, both the stories were nonsense, really. You know, so anyway, there was that. Be careful when you see something about Japan on the internet. Be careful. Look at it with a critical eye, and look at where the information's come from. You know, because this stuff spreads. It seems that the nonsense spreads for those reasons. They know it gets clicks, so they spread it around, so more people see it. And then quite often what happens is it starts off with just a couple of nobodies on the internet trying to get attention, and it can end up being in the mainstream media. So some of the stuff our buddies send us is in the mainstream media. You know, they've picked it up on on the website of one of the news organisations in England, or some other place around the world. Some mainstream media pick up on it, and because it's so widely reported, they assume it's real, and they don't check either because they don't care. They're basically just after clicks as well, aren't they? The mainstream media, so they don't care if it's real. Nobody bothers to check. And it's not hard to check. I'd seen something about that tree before, but it didn't take long to find out that it was, from a park in Tokyo. And, it's not hard if you really want to fact check these things, but they don't really want to, do they? They just want to get the views and the clicks. So, anyway, that was that. Beware of myths from Japan. More videos coming soon.